Hello, friends. I'm JD, the Chief Learning Officer at Exonify and the founder of LearnGeek. And I am here for as long as it takes to answer all of your AI and L&D questions. Maybe not your questions. These questions actually come from a webinar that I did recently in partnership with Training Pros, where I shared my perspective on how AI-enabled technology and how it will fundamentally transform the concept of learning and support in the workplace. And I've been applying AI in my L&D practices for almost 10 years at this point, first in corporate roles and now as part of a team that builds AI-enabled technology. And I bring what I believe is a grounded and strategic perspective to this AI conversation. And my hope is that I can inform how we're going to not just apply AI in doing what we do every day now and do our jobs faster, but fundamentally rethink the role that we can play and the value that we can provide in the workplace as we go through this next phase of digital transformation. Buzzy word, right? Digital transformation. So, as usual, in the webinar, I talked way too much and I didn't leave enough time for questions, even though I tried. I really tried this time. And I think that anyone who takes an hour out of their very busy day to spend time with me should at very least get their question answered. So I'm going to dig into all 29 questions that were submitted during the Q&A portion of the webinar. And just note, the last time I did this, it was for the questions submitted during my in-person session at ATE 23, and that was a 45-minute long video. So we're going to be here for a little while. But the good news is that I'm chaptering the video based on each question. So if you go into the description of the video, you can see the full list of questions that I'm going to address, and then just jump to the ones that you think might be interesting or useful to you. And I also want to let you know that I curate resources related to the use of AI in the workplace. So if you go to my website, learngeek.co/AI, you'll find things like upcoming sessions, presentations, this video, book recommendations, experts that you might want to follow, as well as my AI at Work magazine. And that's where I curate every day articles that I think are worth reading, or videos worth watching, courses worth taking, as related to the application of AI-enabled technology in the workplace today. So be sure to check out the resource website after we're done here. So let's get started. Here we go. First question up. What are the most important AI skills that L&D pros need to develop? The answer is not prompt engineering. Now, I'm not saying prompt engineering is not a useful capability. I'm saying that the technology is going to rapidly evolve in a way where you don't need specialty skills, specialty prompting ability, to be able to get high value output from an AI-enabled system, whatever that system may be. So what I would like to see is learning and development pros focused on a couple of other areas in addition to the big popular conversation around how to prompt the current version of AI-enabled systems, especially generative AI. One, being open to change, because this transformation is going to impact literally every job. Doesn't matter what you do. Somehow, you're going to be relating to technology in a different way, just like when the internet emerged, when mobile devices emerged. It's the next version of that type of foundational transformation in technology. So we have to be open and ready for that type of change. Similarly, we have to learn new ways to engage with technology. A simple example being that by conservatively, the end of next year, any platform that has a search box is going to return an answer or information instead of just returning a list of links and resources. So we have to learn how to engage differently with our technology just in order to do our jobs every day, not just to take advantage of new capability, just to do our jobs. Three, a big one, fostering trust. How do we help the people that we support, the people that we work with, trust this evolution of technology and be part of it, not be suspicious of it, not fear it and think it might damage their ability to just make a living, right? Just live their lives. How do we make sure that we're building relationships and fostering trust across the organization so we're all taking part in this transformation, not being impacted by it? That's something I'm going to say a lot. Not allow technology to be something that is done to us, be something that we participate in. Then there's some kind of low-hanging fruit skills. Curation is one, making sure that we're being able to capture that insight, that knowledge within the organization that AI systems can take advantage of to provide better support. Analysis is another one, looking critically, critical thinking at information that's provided by a system, or thinking critically about how we're going to leverage this technology to build content in different ways, to answer questions in different ways, to identify and action insights in different ways. So I think it's some of those skills that we've been talking about for a long time, but things like fostering trust and thinking critically are going to be even more important just to use technology in your day-to-day life, yet alone use it in the work that you do in learning and development. So thanks for our first question. Let's go to our second question. Which L&D roles are at the biggest risk of being replaced by AI? There are some basic answers to this question. For example, translation. Conservatively, again, next year, translation is going to get really good when it comes to automated translation. I know today it's pretty good, but there are still gaps in terms of local context and culture that the machines can't really pick up, even the best translation models. Fast forward a year, it's going to be really good. So there's going to be a significantly lesser need for formal translation services. There's still going to be a need. There's still going to be nuances or requirements to really make sure we're checking all of the boxes when it comes to making sure we get it right. But for the most part, we're going to be in an automated translation world, which is a great advantage for L&D, because now instead of picking a limited number of options when it comes to translating resources, it can now be up to the employee and what language they prefer to experience learning and development in, as opposed to us giving people options. So translation is a simple example. Voiceover performance is another one. That's fundamentally going away. The need for a voiceover actor, with the exception of those who can deliver unique performances that a machine may not be able to replicate. But in the case of voiceover, I already use tools for that instead of asking people to provide their voice for different types of work that I do. So voiceover is an easy one. Templated content. That includes courses, technical documentation, anyone that's building content that's very systematic, very formulaic in that regard. A machine can do that, and we'll get even better at it. And what it really comes down to is that if a machine can do it, a machine will do it. So it's important for all of us, again, regardless of the role, to really assess our workflows, take a hard look at the tasks that we're responsible for, the things that we do every day, and take action to replace ourselves before technology does it by itself. So how can we start to change our own workflows, adjust our own tasks, introduce technology ourselves to be able to do the jobs more effectively and more efficiently, rather than waiting for someone to make that decision for us? But there are fundamentally certain roles, like I said, around things like translation, voiceover, templated content, where machines will take over that type of capability. So it's on us to look around at the workplace and say, well, where else can we deliver value? Where are we able to be remarkable? Because the unremarkable will be taken over by technology. Thanks for the question. Moving on to our next question. What are your thoughts on the warnings that AI is dangerous and should be slowed down? It is potentially dangerous, but I would liken it to similar potential danger around the internet. And we've seen where the pros and cons of that have gone over the past 30 years. Social media, we've seen over the last 20 years. Mobile devices over the last 10 to 15 years. It's not going to slow down just like that technology did not slow down. I am hopeful that we're having a more meaningful regulatory conversation, different parts of the world doing different things, of course, but thinking about the risk early-ish, because again, AI is not a new technology. Certain models, the large language model, the transformer model, have really changed a lot of the conversation over the past even 8 to 12 months. But AI has been around for decades and then being used within the workplace for at least 20 years at this point, and in learning and development for at least the last 10. But hopefully, we're still pretty early in this conversation in terms of the impact on the workplace. So hopefully regulation does help in that regard, does make people think about how they apply these systems. And I'm excited to see us asking this type of question, because we didn't really ask. I wasn't around for all of these different transformations, but did we ask these questions when it came to social technology and the social intranet? Did we ask these questions when it came to mobile devices? Or did we look very clearly at the opportunity and then look a bit in the rearview mirror when it came to, well, what did it do? What was the impact? Oh, now people are staring at their phones a lot of the day, to the point where potentially they're reshaping their physical form because of how often we're looking down at a screen, how often we're distracted and not able to focus on different tasks because of the opportunity costs associated with that screen. I don't think we had that conversation 15 years ago. I think we're having it now. So hopefully when it comes to AI, especially Gen AI, we're having the conversation early enough where we can start to make decisions about what risks we're willing to tolerate, how we're going to handle the pros and cons of this technology. But we all have to be mindful of the risk associated with it, just like any transformative technology ever in this regard. Thanks for the question. All right, let's head to the next question, which is, what is L&D getting right about AI right now? What are we getting wrong? So on the right side of things, we're being curious. We're talking about it. We're asking a lot of questions. We're looking for potential improvements when it comes to the productivity side of what we do, new opportunities to leverage new tech in new ways. That's all great. We're having a conversation. We're not kind of backburnering this one until someone else makes a decision or just because we're too busy for it. We're having a conversation, broadly speaking. Great. The challenge is, or potentially on the wrong side, is that I think a lot of the conversation is still taking place in silos, where we're talking about AI and L&D, but are we talking more broadly with our organizational partners to say, what's the overarching digital strategy? How are we thinking about applying AI as an organization in the workplace? How is it changing the nature of what the work is? And then figuring out what's our strategy when it comes to enabling that new vision of work. So potentially still too siloed, which is something I think we constantly deal with as L&D. We might be too focused on the short-term gains of things, and that's kind of related, where we should not be focused solely on how much faster can we build a course. That is a very small part of a much bigger story. So we have to be talking about and thinking about the total reimagination of work while we're getting those productivity gains and doing our current jobs better and faster and more effectively, but with the kind of an eye on how is our role as L&D going to fundamentally shift so that we don't get surprised by changes to the workplace that change what we represent and the value that we can provide in the workplace. We have to participate in that conversation while still experimenting and finding those immediate short-term kind of value adds that productivity tools and generative AI can provide. So it's finding that balance, I think, is the biggest concern that I have in terms of what we're doing right and potentially doing wrong. Thanks for the question. Moving on, here we go. What tools do I use in my job? So I have a variety of different places where AI shows up within my tool set. Because again, my belief is that just like a lot of the other ways the technology has evolved over the years, this isn't going to be about using, when do I use AI and when do I not use AI per se. AI is going to be fundamentally the way technology works. So if you search for information, you are using AI. You're not deciding if you're going to or not. Now, there are going to be specialty tools and features that apply AI in different ways, absolutely. But I look at it as it's just how technology is changing, and it's going to be embedded in the workflow, in the tools that I use every day. And that's the world that I'm preparing for. Because right now, when it comes to the tools, it's a Wild West scenario out there. There's just so much new tool, new app. Have you tried this one yet? That it can be very distracting, especially if you allow kind of the FOMO to set in. If you haven't seen the latest tool, are we paying attention to the right types of things? And I liken where we are right now with generative AI to the early app store. Do you remember a time when there was an app on our phone that if we did this with our phone, it made a whip cracking sound? And we were all really excited about that? That is AI right now. And we're eventually, faster than we did before, going to get to that place where it's not about those kind of unique one-off tools anymore. It's about the tools we use every day and then the exceptional tools that stand out alongside that we kind of dive into that aren't part of our day-to-day workflow and try out those new things. So that's where we're going to get to in terms of more consolidated and kind of integrated versions of AI. But right now it's there's a tool for everything and 70 of those and 30 of these. And the trick is to not get distracted by all of that. But beyond that, what do I use or have I used? Well, starting point is my team at Exonify built a tool called Max. So I use our own proprietary large language model and chatbot in order to generate ideas, to summarize information, create assessment questions if I needed to do that, scripting information. So similar to the application of ChatGPT, but proprietary use inside of the organization called Max. You still use ChatGPT for non-proprietary work. Silliest example is I use it to sign all of my digital greeting cards. So if it's your birthday or your work anniversary, I did not write that message. AI wrote that message, but I prompted it with some non-identifiable information about you in order to make sure to get an output that was unique to you. And then I sign it with assistance from AI to make sure people know, because transparency is an important part of the story, making sure people understand where the output is coming from. I use a tool called 11 Labs to do voice generation. So if I need to generate a voiceover of some type, example, I'm in the know. In an upcoming episode, there's going to be a narrator or a voiceover who's going to help us playing a game. And I needed a specific sound to that voice to make sure on the podcast that my voice and the guest's voice differentiate from this announcer voice. I didn't want people to get confused about who is talking in that regard. So I went to 11 Labs, picked an avatar, dropped the script in, and automatically generated the voice clips that I needed. It took me 5 minutes, where in the past it would take hours to find, record, edit that type of content. Synthesia is a popular tool out there used for generating avatars, kind of talking head videos. You might have seen on a past episode of In the Know when we talked about AI. That video is available on the AI resource website that I've mentioned earlier at learngeek.co. I talked to and interviewed a guest about AI, and that guest was AI generated, and I was using the tool Synthesia. And I also used a tool called DID to animate my own avatar. So an animated version of myself came to life and talked in that episode as well. That was using DID. So I'm using a variety of different tools for very specific purposes within the workflow as the entire tool set evolves. So just a couple of examples. So thanks for your question. On to the next one. What are some other use cases for AI in L&D besides content creation? So many potential ideas, especially when we talk about AI more broadly, instead of maybe narrowing specifically to generative AI, which is where a lot of the conversation is centered right now. But even inclusive of generative AI, another great one's reporting. I think we are about to see a fundamental shift in what reporting means. Again, not just in L&D, the broader organization. And we're going to go from ad hoc reporting or maybe flat dashboards to a world where we just ask for what we want. We just tell the machine, tell me who within this organization is most prepared to take on this role that requires these skills. Go. And it automatically gives us that information without having to preset a report or a dashboard, and no clicking involved, just automatic text to insight type reporting. That is on the horizon. Translation, something I've mentioned, I'm going to mention a bunch of times, I'm sure, as a use case for elevating equity and allowing people to have greater access to learning and development resources instead of having to worry about being able to consume the content, yet alone learn the information. Translation is about to no longer be a meaningful problem in the workplace in that regard, which is awesome. Curation is another one, being able to automate pulling information from different repositories. So performance support also included in that conversation to say, where does the knowledge live that I need? Really kind of break down that wall that exists now between those who know and those who need. AI can help us create those connections without it having to be something that's manually done or very difficult to manage across a large, diverse, scaled organization. Personalization, adaptive learning, something I've been working with for the last 9 or so years. So the ability to not deliver a one-size-fits-none type of experience, but really use data to understand what each individual potentially needs and provide that support when and where it's needed. So AI can help power that conversation. And then another great one that my team at Exonify works with is impact measurement. So being able to use a wide variety of data and determine, do learning programs actually work? Right? Did the training help us get to the outcome that we were trying to achieve? Because we saw meaningful changes in what people know, how people perform on the job, the outcome that we're trying to achieve, the business result, and be able to tie the impact back to training, in addition to all the other things that influence people's performance and business outcomes. To be able to basically justify the ROI of learning and development. That's something AI is already, again, helping us do. So again, so many potential use cases, new ideas coming out all of the time. But like I said, it's about how AI is going to fundamentally power our practices, not just specific use cases. It's going to help us do pretty much everything that we do, just like technology helps us do everything that we do today at work. So great question. Moving on to the next one. How can we best harness the power of AI to inform learner needs, SME content, and evidence-based methodologies? Whopper of a question there. A lot going on. Concise response. Hopefully that hits what you were looking for. So I believe you're kind of describing what is a new role for learning and development. That is to train and to tune AI to be able to apply the best of what we know in terms of how it generates output. As an example, go to ChatGPT right now and just ask it to write an assessment question, a quiz question, multiple choice question on any topic. And what you'll notice is it probably does a good job of writing a decent question, maybe even better than a lot of assessment questions that you see come out of academia, learning and development. But what you also may notice is that the machine doesn't understand the rules of learning and development. So it doesn't know to not write a true false question because that's a trick question. It doesn't necessarily know that 3 is the optimal number of answer options in a multiple choice question. We know these things because we're the experts. The machine doesn't necessarily know. The broader internet doesn't necessarily know. So it's our job then to tune these specialty tools to be able to apply evidence-based principles, maybe organizational requirements, to be able to make it as easy as possible for the people using these tools, or maybe using the output from these tools, to get value from them and to see that benefit. And what I think is happening is we are shifting kind of the position of where L&D sits within the organization. So instead of there being, again, people who know, subject matter experts and executives and content contributors, people who know, and then people who need that information to build the right knowledge and skill, and us sitting in the middle as L&D and kind of being the funnel between the two. Because again, we can only handle so many different things, right? We can only go after so many projects, try to solve so many problems. There's a bunch of stuff that we just don't address. So either it doesn't get addressed or it gets addressed without our help. I believe we're going to move out of the middle. And in the middle is going to be the technology, where both sides have access to that technology, can use that technology to gain access to information, to share information. And then sitting underneath that technology is now learning and development, where we help power the machine, making sure the right knowledge, the right insight is available for the machine to be able to do what it does, to train the machine to do what it needs to be able to do for these applications within this organization. And then we're also there to step in and apply our specialty skills when it's something the machine can't do, right? Provide the type of experience that a machine can't replace. To be there in the room, to be there with people, having the conversation, asking the right questions, to be able to generate the right type of experience alongside the machine. So that's how I believe our role is shifting, and where we really play a meaningful role in this is bringing those evidence-based principles to life and making sure that these specialty tools are trained in the right ways and play the right part within the organization. Thanks so much for the question. Next up, what's the role for IDs, instructional designers, in an AI-enabled L&D? I think this is what allows us to get even more proactive as content developers, instructional designers. Again, instructional designer being a term that doesn't necessarily always mean the same thing within organizations, because some people might just handle designing a solution. Some people might go out, work with business partners and subject matter experts and really identify the need, task analysis, all these different types of things, and then design the solution, maybe even build the content, maybe hand it off to a specialty content developer. So every organization is different in terms of the specific work that people do. But overall, I think this allows IDs or L&D professionals to get more proactive, to be able to use tools to identify needs before they become problems, to be able to analyze data, more robust data in different ways, to be able to, again, play a part in training and tuning these tools based on our expertise. And then also to use these tools to build what I call remarkable content. As I mentioned earlier, I think AI is the dividing line between the remarkable and unremarkable. The machine can take care of the unremarkable because the machine doesn't create, the machine applies. We continue to build the remarkable when it comes to building a course, when it comes to performance, when it comes to delivery. When a template won't do the job, that's where our remarkable capabilities come in. And then, of course, as an instructional designer, it's using technology in new ways, whether it's how we write up a project brief using AI to automate and improve some of the output, whether we're building presentations using automated tools, creating imagery in different ways, building videos in new ways. So it's a new tool set that might help consolidate some of that work where today wearing a lot of different hats is really difficult and really time consuming and just really hard. We may be able to put on a lot more hats because those hats get lighter because the hats are made by AI. Strange analogy in that regard. But these tools will hopefully help us handle more problems more quickly and more effectively. And doesn't necessarily mean, oh, we need less people now because one person can handle so many more projects. I think the real opportunity is we can help the organization tackle a lot more problems instead of just handle the same number of problems more quickly. Hopefully that makes sense. Thanks so much for the question. Moving on, how has AI impacted my role so far? I mean, it's really a 10-year at least journey at this point when it comes to the impact of AI-enabled technology on the work that I do as that work has changed. So in the beginning, almost 10 years ago, AI enabled me to get into conversations like translation, automated translation, personalization, adaptive learning, that idea of delivering the right support to the right person at the right time. That's been an AI-powered conversation for the better part of a decade at this point. Then when I kind of shifted roles a bit and I went from focusing on corporate roles and practitioner work, and then I started writing and started speaking within the learning and development profession, I started talking about AI way back in like 2017, way back in 2017. And the interesting thing is when I tried to submit presentations about kind of the evolving AI story, in a lot of cases, they didn't get accepted. So I couldn't speak at conferences on this topic. I was speaking about other topics. And I started to do some sessions on things like adaptive learning. And then I started sharing stories back in like 2018, 2019 that were shaped around generative AI, automatic writing of assessment questions and those types of things. And I started to get some of my proposals accepted, but still not, it wasn't a packed room. It was kind of the early adopter curious folks who were in the room hearing about the direction that technology is potentially heading. And now I go to any event in the industry, and there are at least 6, if not more, sessions directly about AI. And it's interesting to see how many experts have shown up all of a sudden. Take that for what it means. But I think there's significantly more opportunity now to have these conversations, to share experiences, and to share perspective when it comes to how AI is influencing the evolution of technology, influencing the evolution of work, and as a result, influencing the evolution of supporting, enabling that work. I mean, if you got to this point, we're 28 minutes in. The AI conversation enabled you to be here and hang out with me for this long, and we're still just in the beginning of the questions. So here we go. And then, of course, there's the productivity side, the productivity gains to my day-to-day work. I mentioned that when I talked about some of the tools that I use, if you did listen to the answer to that question. But like I said, simple example today, instead of going through the entire process of finding someone in the company to do a voiceover, identifying the right voice, sending them the script, preparing, directing, recording, editing. I just pulled an AI avatar that had the right sound, dropped the script in, took me 5 minutes instead of taking me hours. So there's kind of those core productivity gains in my day-to-day work, depending on what task I might be completing. And then my team now handles a wide variety of tasks differently internally at Exonify. So everything from how we look at translation, providing translated content, translation within the technology, how we handle narration within our content development, similar to what I've mentioned, writing assessment questions, which are a big part of our story in terms of question-based learning. All of that is handled differently now because of the gains that AI and generative AI can provide. So just a couple examples, and great question. Next one. What are your thoughts on AI-generated content, such as videos featuring AI avatars? So I already mentioned that I've used those types of tools when I created a conversation between myself and AI about AI. I think the big thing to think about when it comes to generating that type of content is that the sender is often just as important as the message. And I did a session at a conference on AI earlier this year where I tried to demonstrate this in the silliest way imaginable. So what I did was I showed a video And it was a person talking about the importance of gamification in learning. And the person talking about it was British Santa Claus. So it was Santa Claus with a British accent telling you how effective gamification in learning is. And my question to the audience, a thing I said in public in front of hundreds of people, was, do you trust Santa Claus? And it was just meant to say, if this message is coming out of this person, how much do you trust it? And then I showed a second video, the exact same talk track, the exact same points, but now it was coming from Carl Kopp, an established speaker and subject matter expert on the topic of gamification. Because the Santa Claus video, I just took the scripting from Carl's video and dropped it into an avatar generator and created British AI Santa Claus. And the point was just to say that it's not just about what's being said. It's not just about the script, not just about the content. It's about who is delivering that message and the relationship that they have, what they add in terms of credibility to that message, because it's now becoming super easy to generate decently realistic talking head type videos. A lot of them can't do this though. Not a lot of that happening yet. But I mean, facial expressions, head movement, it's getting out of that uncanny valley area. So it is a tool that we now have available, not just for learning and development, but for communication, a wide variety of ways to deliver a message. And it's definitely useful in some contexts, especially if you can't do this. The person who has the message to deliver isn't comfortable in front of a camera. Maybe it's just better to produce in a different way. You can do it faster without editing and multiple takes and all of those different things. But sometimes I would suggest that a quick smartphone video of a person who does the job and therefore has the trust and credibility of the audience is more impactful than a highly produced AI or not AI video that's delivering the same message, because of the credibility, the trust, the ability for the audience to look at that video, look at that person and say, they know it. They're like me. They face the same problems every day. So if they say that this is a good idea, that's a good way to handle that particular problem, I'm going to lean in. Whereas if it's not even a person, or it's a person like me who doesn't do that job, are they going to lean in? So that's what I would suggest we think about, in addition to the fact that the technology is getting much better every day. And it is a new option and a new part of our toolkit, just like a lot of other AI-enabled applications. Thanks for the question. Next up, how do you determine what's real and what's hype when it comes to AI tech? And I would branch that out to say it's probably a similar process to figuring out what's real and what's hype, broadly speaking, technology speaking, but especially right now with so much hype around AI. I'll start by saying it is mostly hype because there are just too many tools, too much noise, right? Hundreds of new tools every week coming out of nowhere to sometimes do very nuanced and very questionably useful things. Just search for new AI tools and you'll know what I mean. How many tools do you need to do one particular thing? Well, people are throwing the tech at a wall to see what's going to stick. And like I said before, it happens with every new digital transformative moment. And it happened when the App Store opened on the iPhone. And then you had all these apps. And it took us a while to realize 95% are garbage. And we're going to live our lives in the 5%. And every once in a while, get a remarkable new addition. We're heading down that same curve when it comes to the application of AI, fundamentally under all of our tech, and then kind of identifying these new applications and new use cases along the way. So the cycle is not going to last like it is right now forever, where there's so much distraction and potentially enabling the ability to make mistakes when we lean into the wrong tool. So my big recommend is to look to establish partners, right? Take guidance from the folks that you've trusted when it comes to your technology ecosystem to this point, regardless of who they may be or what systems you use or who your providers are. If you trust them to this point, talk to them and say, not only how are they augmenting their tools, but what tools are they potentially using, right? If you're maybe not a technology company, you're not sure where to look, it's a good chance that if you ask a technology company, they're going to have a pretty informed opinion because it's what they do. And they're looking at this technology from a different lens because they're considering how it can help them augment not just their processes, but their products and services. And they're also considering things like regulatory considerations, data privacy practices. All of those different questions we have are being very seriously considered by anyone who is building, not just applying, but building with this type of technology. So I'd say it's a great place to start is looking at the folks that you work with today and trust when it comes to your digital ecosystem. I think it's also important to determine, are you going to be an early adopter? Right? Do you have the time, the capacity, the risk tolerance to meaningfully try out new things and to try to scale new ideas? Or are you more of an organization that's going to lean into the more accepted, the more tried and tested, the more proven applications, whether it's coming from someone you trust today or whether it's implementing a new system to get new types of value? So determining where you are on that adoption curve, what you're willing to do as an organization, in addition to as a function. And I would say, look for evidence of impact, not just people saying AI could. That's one of the things. If you go to a lot of webinars or read a lot of papers and articles on the subject, which I do, you see the word could a lot, can and could, because we're still early when it comes to parts of this conversation, not early to the AI conversation, but early to some of the new applications of this technology. So there's a lot of by 2035s and a lot of it could allow you to do these things faster and could impact these processes. Doesn't mean it is, doesn't mean it definitely can. So I look for evidence of impact, not potential promises and maybes. And I do think that requires dedicating resources to, again, not just AI, but broader your technology resources. So do you have someone within your team who is responsible for asking these questions, for doing this research, for kind of keeping everyone on the same page, keeping everyone educated about how this is going? Because it's very easy to get left behind, especially with how fast things are moving, and develop that FOMO when you have a job to do every day. You're putting out fires, hopefully figuratively, when it comes to the work you do. And then there's all of this. I do this for a living and I struggle to keep up. I live in learning technology and workplace technology and employee experience. And I struggle. I can't imagine someone who doesn't have the time and resources to try to keep pace with the marketplace. So I think it's important to make sure you dedicate the right amount of resources on your team to do the exploration, to keep everyone aligned, to answer those types of questions, to build a resource library, an education library, to help kind of bring everyone up with them versus constantly feel like you're falling behind or maybe make the wrong decision and introduce new risk, because that is a very real possibility when it comes to how fast things are moving and that potential FOMO you might have if you're not taking advantage of this capability right now. Does it lead you to make the wrong decision? Hopefully that's helpful. We're over 37 minutes in, everybody. Thanks for still being here. Or if you jump to this question, thanks for jumping. Next question. How do we address the issue of non-accuracy? It's a good use of parentheses on this question. Non-accuracy with AI-generated content. The simple answer is to draw a line. What's really interesting about this, so let's take chatbots as an example. ChatGPT, just as the common example. Ask it the same question twice. It may provide you with the same answer, but it's not the same answer, right? It's different text answering the same question with hopefully the same level of efficacy. And that is not something we are used to, especially in learning and development. We are used to this document, awkward book plug. This document has been approved by the subject matter expert, management, legal, HR. This is the word. This is what people can use. If it has not been approved, it cannot be used. A lot of us live in that world, and depending on what industry you're in, you have different levels of that. So it's always funny when people say I work in a highly regulated industry, because I've yet to meet someone who says I work in a completely unregulated industry. But I worked in a highly regulated industry, multiple of them, and tons of conversations around legal approval and how that impacted our ability to deliver solutions at the pace needed by the organization. So we come from that world. We play in a high-risk environment in learning and development because we're helping people do their jobs, helping them make decisions that impact them, impact the customer, impact the organization. And in some cases, you work in a safety-critical environment where making the wrong decision has major repercussions. So we're not used to a world where the answer is not always the same and it's not always approved in a letter by letter fashion. So we have to draw lines when it comes to when is interpretation okay? When do I need verbatim? When is it okay to restate the answer as long as the answer carries the right spirit of information with it? And then we have to test. So if we're going to use generative AI to change the way people search for information, you're going to use a chatbot to help people coach as a digital assistant, we have to play with those tools. We can't assume this works because it's AI. We have to use those tools. We have to use those tools in specific contexts, maybe with specific information to start, to say we're going to use this tool with this audience, and it's going to be available to support this type of work because it doesn't cross the line. We're comfortable with that. And then we've also informed the audience to emphasize their kind of critical thinking of that information. So they don't look at this as this is a legally approved document with the exact words. Look at this similar to if you asked the person next to you and said, hey, how do you do this? It's kind of that experience, right? Because you don't always know. So you look at that answer critically, because if your peer says, do it this way, and you sit there and go, that can't be right? That's not anything. That you don't just assume that that person knows. It's different than asking your manager, who's the authority figure, who you have to assume knows. But sometimes, again, think critically about that conversation too. It's not the legally approved document. So we have to make sure people look at the tools that we're introducing the right way based on where we are with our level of confidence, how we're drawing lines. We have to make sure we build trust with people so that they understand we brought them along on the ride, right? We don't just swap out technology and suddenly people don't know what to trust. We have to make sure people are involved in the conversation. They understand where we are because it is not perfect, right? Again, it doesn't matter what technology you're using. It's still iterating. It's still getting better. Some people say some of it's getting worse. Depends on where you're coming from. We have to make sure that people are looking at it through the right lens. And the reality is the tech's going to get better. Some people, I love when they say, today is the worst that AI will ever be, because it's just going to continue to improve and iterate over time. But we have to remember, we play in a high stakes environment when it comes to learning and development. And when the regulations start to change, we also work in a highly regulated space, regardless of what industry you're in, because training is going to be meaningfully regulated because of the impact that we have on people's livelihoods, on their earning ability, on their ability to be safe and confident in the job. That's the space we play in, where some other parts of the business may not be as highly regulated when it comes to this application because of the potential risk and impact associated with their work. So we have to keep all of that in mind and be clear in terms of where we draw lines as an organization, as a function, and then adhere to those lines. Make sure everyone understands where those lines are. Next question. Next up, it's the privacy question. How do you handle privacy? Big question. Working with a few companies that have proprietary software, et cetera, they discourage using AI because once you use AI, it's out there. We have to make sure we understand how technology works before we introduce technology. I might say this a couple of times in this video. If the tool is free, you are the product. Don't use free technology, generally speaking, right? Unless you understand the risk associated to it. Don't introduce new technology into your organization until you talk to the IT department, who hopefully has rules and guidelines around what tolerance your organization has for risk, what the process is for vetting any different type of technology to protect you, your customers, the company, et cetera. There have been some big examples that have come out in the news, and I'm sure there will be more, of organizations who allowed data to leak, right? Introduced a tool, used something in the workplace, and then something went wrong with that data, and it was no longer private, it was no longer proprietary, it's just out there. We have to make sure that we have guidelines in place. Every company needs clear guidelines associated to technology, inclusive of AI, around what is and is not permitted. And we all have to understand that and make decisions accordingly. This is one of the reasons why, even in my own company, I don't use any external AI tech with proprietary information. I won't even put a person's name in a chat bot to generate that greeting card message that I use AI to generate, because I don't want to use anyone's identifiable information in some random technology. But we have a proprietary tool that's behind the wall that meets all of our necessary security requirements. That's the tool that I use when it comes to writing an assessment question that I want to use inside of our own platform, right? That type of thing. So we have to make sure we understand how the tech is used. Where's the data? Where is data being stored? Is the data being used to train or tune a model? What is saved? What is not? Is there a memory associated with this technology? If let's say the same technology is being used by multiple companies, how is my proprietary information being used as compared to someone else's? Making sure those streams don't cross, because I don't want my IP training a tool and then being used in other companies' IP. No, that doesn't work, right? So we have to make sure we understand all of that before we introduce a new tool. So overall guidance, suggestions, just don't introduce random new tools or adopt new features without this type of clarity. So even if an existing tool that you're using adds or changes something about how they handle data, how they generate content, ask these questions so that we make sure it aligns with the guidelines we have, so we don't accidentally break a rule, break a regulation, introduce risk to our business. So involve IT, involve legal, build that relationship, make sure we're part of the larger organizational conversation, not just making our own rules and within the L&D silo. And then also continue to follow the regulatory conversation, because if you support people, and we're familiar with this as L&D, right? Because we look at regulatory training. Sometimes there's a different requirement in the state of New York, state of California, nation of Germany, right? Same type of story. We have to follow the changing regulatory conversation because, frankly, we may be able to use different types of data and tools in different places in different ways. And we have to make sure we're up to date on that and not introduce risk for ourselves and our businesses. Great question. Next question. I'm sure it's going to be much less heavy than the question around privacy. Let's see. I was wrong. This is the bias question. So how can we make sure that AI doesn't succumb to unconscious bias or cultural appropriation? For example, when images are selected, who has the final responsibility? We do. So we are responsible for how we use tools and how we use them in an inclusive and equitable way. One sidebar real quick to make sure everyone's aligned on. You can't copyright AI generated content. So let's say you upload a bunch of information into a writing assistant and use it to write a book. Guess what? You don't own the book, because copyright law does not recognize, in the US at least, I've not read every law on earth, but in the US at least, copyright law does not recognize derivative work generated by AI. Heads up, generally speaking. But back to this particular question. The reality is the machine is not going to solve the problem for us. The machine is not going to act ethically. It doesn't know what that means. It's not going to eliminate bias. It doesn't know what that means. It only knows what the data that we insert and use to train the model or the machine with, and then the output that we request. It's all it knows. It's up to us to solve for this problem and to create guidelines and guardrails and establish a vision for the workplace that we want to create. So if AI generates a recommendation or a content item that is biased, that is on us, the people using the tool to generate the outcome, because we gave it the permission to do that. So we have to be discerning in how we're using technology to augment our work, to make recommendations, to make suggestions, to potentially make decisions. Where are we comfortable with that? Where are we not comfortable with that? How are we making sure that we include people in that process? The image example, because you called out images being selected. We have to set guidelines on what is and is not okay. Right? What do we want to use to represent our work, ourselves, our company in that regard? And we have to follow those guidelines regardless of the tools that we're using to generate the information, the answer, the recommendation, the content. So the machine's not going to do it for us. It's on us because we're the ones using the technology. Next with a question. Is it going to get lighter from here? Do you have examples or case studies that demonstrate successful integration of AI in corporate learning initiatives? I do, but I have to get a little bit vendory for this one. I apologize for that. The reality is, though, that every case study at exonify.com is an AI case study, because we use AI as a foundational technology capability within our learning platform. So that includes adaptive learning and reinforcement, which is at the core of the Exonify experience. It includes generative AI, because we have a content generation tool, which we have examples of translation automation when we handle 63, I believe, languages right now. And a lot of that is automated translation, both from a social perspective with messaging, as well as a content perspective. And then we also have a tool that measures impact. So there are some examples there of people measuring the ROI of their learning programs through Exonify. And then we also have our latest announcement is the addition of basically a digital assistant type of a conversational tool through AI called Max. So the challenge is often, at least right now, that the tech is so new, or the applications of generative AI and this version of AI is so new that there's still a lot of it can do or it should help us, but there aren't a lot of broad impact stories yet because frankly, people haven't been super interested in this for more than like 8-9 months. The Chat GPT thing changed the conversation. And as someone who's been trying to have this conversation for a couple of years, I noticed the difference in interest. Maybe I'm just not interesting enough to generate my own. Thanks, Chat GPT. But my recommendation is for examples or case studies to look to organizations who have been doing this for a long time, because a lot of legacy technology providers have been using AI in different ways, again, as foundational capability, not just specific use cases, for a long time. And they may not have screamed, "This is an AI case study," right? It may just be how the technology works, which is true of adaptive learning. It's just how the technology works, even though it doesn't say AI adaptive learning, right? So Exonify is just one example, but check out any of our case studies. And if you want any specifics or need any more details, feel free to reach out to me directly. Happy to provide more insight there. Thanks for your question. Next up, what would be the pros and cons of using AI as just-in-time performance support? Huge, right? Again, awkward book plug. So in my book, The Modern Learning Ecosystem, available at jdwroteabook.com, I talk about the modern learning ecosystem framework. And the two foundational layers, the kind of basis of learning and support, is shared knowledge and performance support. So the ability to access, share information when needed, contribute to the larger kind of collective wisdom and insight of the organization. And then performance support, be able to raise my hand and say, I can't find, I don't know, I don't understand, I need help. A little more proactive when it comes to support. Those foundational layers fundamentally shift when it comes to this type of transformation of technology, because it now introduces the ability to not have to rely on kind of human organization of information. Think about your knowledge base or your SharePoint website. How easy is it to find information? How effective are the search results? Right? Are you able to access the information you need, or are you just being pointed to a PowerPoint presentation that you then need to open, download, dive into, figure out what slide the answer's on, right? The experience of sharing, accessing, and applying information to support performance fundamentally shifts when you can just ask for what you want and get back what you need, hopefully sourced, because we still need to know where the information is coming from. But when it can be presented in a way that is actionable, fundamentally shifts the concept of just-in-time performance. So very excited about where this goes. Of course, that's the pro. Exciting. The cons. What's in that knowledge base today? Right? Let's say you took a large language model, chatbot, digital assistant, you plugged it on top of your knowledge base or bases today, because most organizations, things are in SharePoint and Google Drive and over there and on the company website, right? There's stuff everywhere. And if you kind of integrated all of that with a large language model and a chatbot, now people can ask questions. What would they get back in terms of answers? Because again, the machine doesn't know what's real, right? It doesn't know what's true. It's doing its best to pattern match, autocomplete, and figure out the information in order to be able to respond to the question. Do you have the right information? Have you curated? Have you manicured? Have you trimmed your knowledge base over time so it can really take advantage of it? Or is it going to be delivering 5 different versions of the same answer because 5 different versions are out there? Or maybe even worse, none of it's out there because we haven't written anything down. And it's in the minds of subject matter experts. The machine can't get in there. Hopefully it never will, because that's a whole nother conversation. But are we well documented in a way with our shared knowledge resources where we can activate that layer of shared knowledge or performance support? Is the AI tuned to handle your information and your potential needs? Because maybe people within your business, or maybe even different parts of your business, use information in different ways. So could AI who's supporting a contact center agent need to be meaningfully different than AI supporting a retail store employee? Would they benefit from the same tools and the same use of information, or do you need to tweak that a little bit differently based on the application side of the story? And then do you have guidelines in place, which we mentioned earlier, for handling high risk information? So is there certain information that you just want the verbatim, right? Here's the resource, completely approved. This is it, versus interpreted by the machine to provide the answer using the source, right? Because again, in a lot of cases, we're used to this is the legally approved language as compared to, no, this is based on the legally approved language, but it's been restated based on what you specifically asked for. So do we have clear guidelines in place when it comes to the use of that information? The comparison I keep making is we often have to think about AI as being part of the team, right? So the digital assistant is now a team member, and we're going to look at their answers the same way we look at Bill. Do you trust Bill? Are you Bill? Right? We have to think critically about the information. We say, Bill, how do I do this? And Bill gives you the answer. Sounds like a good answer. I trust Bill. I'll use that information. Maybe I don't know Bill very well. I don't trust Bill. That sounds wacky, Bill. Not going to use that information. I'm going to go ask Brian. I don't know why everyone I work with starts with a B. Thanks for your question. Next one up. We're still going big. Can AI or GenAI ever outgrow the need for human oversight? Can it become, quote, trusted? My question back is, do you trust Google Maps? Most of the time, right? At least to a good degree. Google usually knows what's not just the way to get there, the best way to get there right now. Here are the options for how to get there. But sometimes Google Maps doesn't know that Taylor Swift is in town, and there is no way that I'm going near downtown tonight because, wow, that's a lot of Swifties that are going to be in my way. I'm going to take an alternative route because I know more than the machine in this particular application. And we get to decide how much we trust our tools. And that's an important conversation, not just having learning and development, but broader within the organization and also from within the regulatory environment. So it's important for us to set guidelines and standards for what we want the experience of work to be, and to not let the tech be something that's done to us, to be something that we participate in. And as I continue to say, I believe that AI is going to insert itself into the unremarkable sides of work. The things that a machine can do well that we shouldn't have been doing in the first place to allow us to handle the remarkable. That's how I see it. Thank you for your question. Next up, there's a fun word in this one. When does AI begin backdooring every corporation's cloud services for the IP regardless of the policy? Very curious where you work. It sounds like you might be asking the question about, is AI just going to steal all the stuff regardless of the rules? And I would hope not. And that's why every company needs a policy. So hopefully your organization right now has guidelines around how technology is used inclusive of AI, how data is used inclusive of AI, or you're making that policy right now or expanding it to include the latest evolutions in this technology. And that includes if and how your data and technology can apply AI in different use cases. So an example for me personally is I do a lot of talking, as you can tell, usually not over an hour straight to a camera, but I have a speaker agreement. So if you sign me up to speak at your event, I send you a document that outlines the agreed upon activities, compensation, travel, logistics, resources needed, equipment, all of those different types of things. And I recently added a clause, it's under the IP section, where it talks about the content that I generate as part of this agreement is owned by me. It also now includes a clause that prohibits the organizer from using my IP within an AI-enabled application. So the host can typically record the engagement, record the keynote delivery, send that recording out to the participants, but it can't be posted publicly, those types of things. But now I also say that my IP, which is inclusive of my content, so materials that I use, my likeness, my voice, cannot be used to train an AI, cannot be used within a platform that uses AI for search purposes, and can also not be made available where it can be accessed by a generative AI tool. So you can't take the recording of me and then post it publicly where it can be scraped by another AI tool that's using it as training data. So I specifically added that language into my agreement because I believe we all need that level of protection, because we should be allowed to decide how and if we participate in this conversation. Because I didn't create anything before now with the intention of it being used in a particular way. And you see this in a lot of conversations around copyright and lawsuits associated to AI and whatnot. So I think we have to look at our own work, our organization's work, and clarify what the rules are, in addition to what the broader regulations are, and then hold to those rules and make sure we have those conversations anytime we talk about technology, data, and related topics. Hopefully nothing is backdooring our systems, though. Doesn't sound good. Next question. Will any part of our job be left? This is getting dire at the end of our conversation. Can we do anything to shift what we do to preserve our career? Something I've said a couple of times is that AI doesn't create, it applies. We create. So what we have to do is look at our jobs, right? The work that we do every day, the tasks that we handle, and look for the remarkable in terms of how we can contribute, how we generate, how we create, how we foster new ideas, as well as the role that we play within the technology, helping to apply the technology, helping to build that type of digital experience. Because this is going to impact every job in different ways, just like the internet impacted every job. And there are going to be pros and cons to that, including for someone like me. We get to decide, though, how we participate. And we have to have this conversation now and be thinking about this now, which is why I love this question now. Because if we don't talk about this, we don't think about it, we don't look at our own workflow and look for the remarkable, tech is going to happen to us instead of being something we participate in. So yes, but I don't think we should look at it as what's going to be left of our current jobs. It's how is our contribution going to evolve as the nature of work evolves, and how do we participate and help foster that? That's what we should be thinking about right now. Thanks for the question. A couple more left. I am transitioning to learning and development. Which AI tools do you recommend I should get myself familiar with? I would not start with specific tools. So it's kind of like, as an instructional designer, to be an effective instructional designer does not mean you also have to know a specific platform, right? Maybe a certain job might require you to be able to use certain types of technology, but it's not a simple cause and effect. If I know how to use that tool, I am this. Doesn't work that way with most jobs, but especially in learning and development. So a couple of recommendations. One, I've mentioned the resource website a couple of times, learngeek.co/AI. I have a couple of different educational programs there. So some of them are from LinkedIn Learning, some are from Google. There's one that talks about using AI to boost productivity. So check out those programs just to kind of get yourself well-versed in what this conversation is, what AI is, and start to think about, well, how does this relate to the type of work I want to do? I think quickly over time, there's some out there, including some of the folks I recommend on that website, that are building specific education programs associated to learning and development itself. But what I would suggest is that the entire L&D tool suite is going to be AI enabled rapidly over time. Some of it already is, and some of it will introduce new functions and features leveraging these types of capabilities. So it's going to be fundamental to the entire tool set, just like it's going to be part of all of your Microsoft applications pretty soon, depending on if you pay for the additional enhancement. But the specific tools are going to depend on the specific type of work you want to do and who you want to work for. So looking at job descriptions right now, I think would be a really good idea to see what's there, or what are the expectations of the different types of work for the types of organizations that you want to work for. And I would suggest that for anybody. So let's say you're not looking for a job right now, not thinking of transitioning roles or companies, still look at job openings. I post job openings almost every day on LinkedIn. I'm not currently looking for a job as part of the practice. I'm just trying to support anyone who might be looking for an opportunity. But it actually helps me because I'm reading them along the way. And it helps me understand how the nuances are changing, how the requirements are shifting. What are people looking for? What are the trends, right? What types of jobs are popular right now as compared to what people were looking for a year ago? I can tell you what some of those things are just anecdotally because I'm posting jobs all the time. So I think it's a great educational tool to help you keep up to date, because you might start to notice that job descriptions are requiring certain skills or looking for certain types of technology capability. And maybe you don't have those skills today because you don't need them in your current job, but maybe it's something you want to start working on because you might be looking for a new opportunity in the near future, as it were. So that's just a generally good idea. Um, let's see. Simple examples of how to use technology. I do think how to ask for what you want, because AI is enabling, again, how we interact with technology in a new way. So instead of telling the technology what to do, we're now able to ask for what we want, right? So we have to be good at that. I don't think that requires deep prompt engineering skills, and some people might get benefit from that. But just like coding, not everyone has to be able to code, but it comes in handy in certain applications. But I do think we have to understand how to engage different types of specialty tools, and prompting and being able to ask for the right information is going to be important. I think making time to explore new capabilities. So if you're using an existing authoring tool and it starts to add some new features, making sure you're able to carve out capacity to work with those tools, so that you become comfortable and can start to integrate them into your workflow. And then thinking critically is a huge skill set. So even before thinking about a certain type of tool or technology, really thinking about how we look critically at problems, problem solving skills, those types of things. I would much rather bring on a member of the team who is great at problem solving, great at digging in, asking good questions, and then teach them how to use technology, because that's a lot easier, broadly speaking. So thanks for the question, and good luck transitioning into your new role. Fear. Feels like the fear is, will Gen AI replace humans, specifically regarding insight and creativity? Thought. Back to something I've said over and over again during our hour together. We get to decide. We collectively, as people, get to decide how tech evolves. Always been true. That also includes the regulatory side of things, which is where I think the greatest pinch point is. We want to have an impact. Technology companies gonna technology company, right? They're gonna build, they're gonna sell. Where we get to really have a direct impact is, one, inside of our job, inside of our organization, and then inside of the regulatory body. That's why voting is important. So I think this is something that you should be considering when it comes to, regardless of where you live in the world, how you work with regulators. What do you prioritize? Right? There's a lot of other topics out there that are very important as well. This is not currently at the top of my list, but it's high on the list when it comes to regulatory considerations. So we get to have a vote at multiple layers of this conversation when it comes to what we want the human experience of work to be. As I've said multiple times, I believe AI replaces the unremarkable, not unremarkable people, unremarkable activities. So look at our work, look at our potential work, find the remarkable. How can we contribute more in that area? So overall, the answer to this question is just be remarkable. Thanks. Next up, almost there, getting there soon. We had a conversation earlier about bias, but another one here is, what do we need to do to avoid unconscious bias and ensure diverse voices are represented in AI tools? This is kind of a simple question to answer, even though it's a very complicated concept. The answer is involve people, right? Are the people that we want to reflect in the technology involved in decisions around the use of the technology? If not, guess what we're leaving ourselves open to? So that includes people from a variety of backgrounds, a variety of roles, a variety of functions. If it's just L&D having a conversation about how we're going to use technology, it's going to reflect our bias, our perspective, and maybe not the perspective of the people we're trying to help. And we have that problem a lot, not bringing people along for the ride, whether it's how we design a solution, a program, but now in this case, it's how we shift the use of technology to support and enable work. So we can't silo the conversation. We have to involve other people in the conversation and leverage those voices to establish a vision for the organization when it comes to what inclusion and equity means for us. Set those guidelines, set those guardrails, and then hold our tools and our processes to those standards. That includes partners we work with, as well as the work we do internally. And we have to know and understand what data is being used to train this type of technology. And what does that reflect, right? How is that inclusive of the voices and the vision that we have for our organization? Ultimately, it's on us. We're deciding how to use the technology. The tech is not going to solve the problem. A machine is not going to solve for bias. It doesn't know what bias is, right? It's not going to make good decisions unless we enable it to. So we have to include people in the conversation for the conversation to be inclusive. Simple enough, right? Thanks for the question. Next up, please repeat the name of your company and website, please. Hi, I'm JD. I founded LearnGeek and I work for Exonify. So if you want to check us out, my website is learngeek.co and Exonify's website is exonify.com. This is a good moment to take a drink. Next question. Could AI taking the place of leadership coaching? The thought is that if the right content or questions, parentheses, prompts, were loaded in the AI system, it could work. Yes. Next question. No, coming back. It really comes back to, for me, first of all, how you define coaching. So what is the specific set of activities that we're talking about introducing technology into? So if we're talking about using data and insights about someone's performance to provide targeted feedback and really kind of nudge people towards improvements, recommend, hey, if you're struggling in this area, you might want to take a look at this. Or, hey, if you're having this type of conversation, your contact center agent, the AI might be listening to the conversation and then nudge the agent to say, hey, you might want to take a look over here, mention this product, mention this recommendation. All of that, AI can do it. It's a great idea to augment performance in that way. So acting as a digital coach. Now, if we're talking about coaching in terms of building relationships, establishing trust, getting to know someone, AI cannot do that. So that's where the human side of coaching comes in. So overall, the AI is going to be a critical tool for us to reinforce behavior, because today, human coaches, whether that be a professional coach, peer trainer, a manager, they're limited, right? I used to manage the world's busiest roller coaster. I had a couple of hundred people working with me at that roller coaster. I could not spend time with each individual person. So I had to narrow down my focus to people who were in particular need at that time, right? Build relationships as broadly as I could, but I often saw certain people more than I saw other people because that's just how the workplace functions. What AI can do is help us enhance those offerings and scale that type of support so that no one is just overarchingly left behind. Hopefully no one is today, but everyone can receive some type of timely, personalized support. And then the manager or the coach can use similar insights to say, where do I need to focus my limited time? Where is that nudge or the AI, the digital assistant, not enough? Where do I have to insert my capability? Where do I have to build a relationship and establish trust because there's an engagement gap or a performance gap in this particular area? So it does not replace the human coach, does not replace relationships, but it augments the fact that we can't scale ourselves to that ability. Whether you have a couple of hundred people working with you, maybe a dozen people working with you, it's still hard. So making sure everyone gets the support they need when and where they need it, that's a huge part of the story. It's been a huge part of adaptive learning for a long time, and it's now going to extend itself into more and more parts of the workflow through this type of capability. So completely on board with you. Thanks for the question. Next up, to be fair.
This might answer your question. James Thomas Fallon is an American stand-up comedian.
I don't know why Amazon right now is trying to tell me about Jimmy Fallon, but it's live entertainment, everybody. Alexa, stop. What I was saying was, to be fair, most humans are terrible at writing assessment questions. Yes, they are. That's why the answer is always the long one with all the legal jargon in it. You know what I'm talking about. You've written that question. I've written that question too. And the reality is machines can already write better multiple choice questions than people can, as long as the machine is trained with evidence-based principles of instructional design to be able to write that good question. So they don't do the true false trick question. They don't include 5 different distractors because 2 distractors and a correct answer is the optimal number of answer options, right? These types of things we know. Patty Shank told us. Check out Patty Shank's book about writing multiple choice questions if you do a lot of assessment creation. But the trick is that by, again, conservatively, the end of this year, we do not have to write assessments anymore. Machines can do that for us as long as they're tuned to evidence-based principles. They can handle, at very least, first draft. We can go in and tweak and deploy question-based learning and assessments that much faster. So completely on board. And I believe my digital assistant friend over there also agrees. So thank you so much. Next question. Does it cost, and where do I find the bot that takes parentheses and summarizes meeting notes? First comment is that if tech is free, you are the product. So generally speaking, do not trust free technology with important information. So if you look at Microsoft Copilot, it's kind of the latest benchmark when it comes to what the cost of these tools is going to be able to access the high quality, secure, private side of AI-enabled technology, which I believe Copilot's around $30 a month per user, which is significant. But that speaks to the amount of gain and value they expect you to get from this type of technology. And I think you're going to see that spread in terms of the different types of tools that are available. So there's different price points for different types of technology out there. The example would be that I've used in meetings is a platform called Airgram. What it does is it kind of joins the meeting alongside of you, and then it transcribes your meeting notes, identifies who the different speakers are in the transcript, and then summarizes the notes from the meeting, adds keywords and things like that to make the transcript more searchable. Basically eliminates the need for you to have to go watch the whole recording to find something of value. You can very quickly scrape information off of that meeting and turn a 60-minute recording into a couple of minutes of analysis to make sure you've got the information you can head on your way. Example from Airgram, I just looked at their website today. Their price point is $18 per month per user. So again, I recommend taking a look at, what are the use cases you're looking for, the problems you're trying to solve through this technology. Then what are some proven applications for that? What are their price points? And then what's the value proposition, right? What value are you going to get from this additional investment? Because if I know anything about chief financial officers and chief information officers, it's that they don't like spending more money on technology, right? They want to get value from that spend. So it's not just about asking for more resources and more budget to get more technology. What value you're going to get? What's the trade-off, right? Well, if I have this technology, I'm going to be able to get this value, this time savings, this productivity, this problem solved. And this is how the solution pays for itself. That's the type of conversation we need to have when it comes to justifying any technology, but especially kind of this augmentation of maybe some of our existing tech stack. But thanks for your question. Next up, just a couple more left. Hour and 18 minutes or so. I don't know what I keep saying that keeps triggering over there. Something I'm saying sounds like that digital entity's name over there. Try not to trigger your digital assistants as well. All right. Applying for an L&D job. Congratulations. Hope you have good luck. What should I say about AI that would differentiate me from other candidates on an interview? So what I would suggest is start off by telling them how you created positive results for your organizations that you worked with before, which is not explicitly about AI. But that is what differentiates people when it comes to applications is I made a measurable difference in my work, and this is what that difference was, and this is how I achieved that. Emphasize a willingness to learn, especially in conversations, to be able to learn new tools, adapt your processes, adopt new methods, because that's what's going to be important when it comes to the type of digital transformation that we're in the beginnings of right now through generative AI. And then I would look at the job description for any specifics when it comes to technology requirements. So what types of tools do they expect you to be able to use on the job? And emphasize your ability to leverage those tools. Because like I said, it's likely that those tools are either already AI enabled or they're going to become AI enabled. So it's less about I can use that specific new tool over there and more about I can use technology to solve problems in meaningful ways with measurable outcomes. And then I would demonstrate your ability to do those things through any type of maybe portfolio, depending on the type of work and type of job that you're applying to, if there is a way to show your work. Another way, maybe if you're not a designer or content developer, in my case, I'm not. I once was. I'm not currently. So I don't have a portfolio of digital content that I create from an instructional perspective, but I do have a portfolio of content that I contribute. So conversations that I engage in, articles that I write, podcasts that I create, my live stream show, right? So talking about these types of topics within conversations in webinars or online on LinkedIn comments or in maybe articles you contribute somewhere, it shows that you have an awareness of an insight and kind of perspective to contribute to the conversation. So I think that's important to build that level of awareness within your network so that you have something to bring to the table to say, this demonstrates my understanding of, see that awkward book plug that happened there again? That shows that I'm involved and engaged and aware and knowledgeable in this particular area within my work. And then I can use that to drive outcomes. And then in an interview, I'd be ready to answer questions about this. So I think everyone in learning and development, again, regardless of role, but tuned to your particular role, needs to be able to answer questions about AI. So that's why I think everyone needs to know enough to be dangerous. We do not all have to be data scientists or machine learning engineers in this conversation. But I do think foundational education programs, a basic level understanding of what we mean when we say AI, when we say generative AI, how these models basically work. So that if you go into that interview and they ask you, well, what are you exploring when it comes to generative AI in your practices? Or how do you think generative AI is going to impact the type of work that you do? You need to be able to answer those types of questions. Check out the resource website for some recommended subject matter experts, books, and educational programs. Thank you so much. Two more. Besides instructional design, I am a voiceover for e-learning, explainer videos, etc. Do you think AI avatars will replace voiceover artists? Yes. That's just the frank reality of the situation. And again, I believe AI is going to take over the unremarkable side of work. So, and I have mentioned that I already use AI voices and avatars to replace content already. And it's not perfect yet, but it is very good. And it gets me the work that I need done much faster than if I had to do it myself, ask around for other people to do it, or try to hire someone to do that type of work. So I do think voiceover is one of the areas where we're not necessarily looking at augmentation. We are looking at replacement of task. When it comes to this, translation services, a couple of other kind of niche places where the unremarkable work, not unremarkable people, but the unremarkable work can be handled by a machine. It's good enough. It's not great. Will there still be a place for people who are great at voiceover? I do believe. I don't think you're going to go to every animated film and have every character voiced by a machine. Do I think you will see some voices that represent your favorite celebrity created by a machine? Yes. Darth Vader, right now, anytime you see Darth Vader, that is James Earl Jones's voice digitally augmented by a machine, right? So we are going to see a bunch of people licensing their voices to then be used by machines so they don't have to stand in the booth. The machine can just take care of it for them if they so choose. So I think that field is going to change wildly in the immediate term. But I do think there's value in the fact that I want Darth Vader to sound like Darth Vader. And guess who owns that, right? I don't want a machine to displace James Earl Jones. I want James Earl Jones to permit his voice to be used in that area. So I think we have to look at that type of work differently moving forward. Thanks for the question. It's the last one. I'm going to gear up for this one. Hopefully my voice is held up decently on your end. Here we go. How do you use AI? Is it a piece of software you install on your computer? Right now, the reality is that AI is mostly a cloud-based tool, right? There are different iterations of this technology accessed in different ways. But broadly speaking, we're talking about type of software that you might use on the internet for a variety of different things. Or maybe AI capabilities embedded. So Canva, as an example, a design application that is accessed via the cloud, via your web browser, has AI capabilities in it to do auto generation of different types of content. So it's similar in that regard. So ChatGPT is a website that you go to where the chatbot is and you enter prompts and it generates text-based information. Or I use, if you subscribe to my newsletter, awkward plug, Ecosystem, which is available on my website. If you go to learngeek.co, you can find the link to Ecosystem. Subscribe for typically weekly insights into the modern working and learning experience. I have a featured image in every edition of that newsletter. And lately it's been the guy in the green hoodie. Doesn't look like me, but it's guy in green hoodie is meant to represent me in the latest editions of the newsletter. And I generate those images using Bing Image Creator. So I go to the website for Bing Image Creator, log in, and I input the prompt of what I want the image to look like. I want the cartoon of the person in the green hoodie doing this activity, looks like this, maybe is in this setting. And then Bing generates a set of images for me. And I say, I want to use this one. And I pull it into my Substack newsletter. Or I say, I do not like any of these images. Let's try again, sometimes again, to get to the image that I want to represent the story that I'm telling that particular week. So soon, AI-powered features are going to be in all of the tech that you're using every day. Things like Microsoft 365, Google Docs, right? Just part of how technology works. So instead of AI being the separate thing, it's going to be how technology functions and how we interact with technology. And then there are going to be some use cases or some applications that are very niche or specific that we might pull into our workflows that are not already there today. So for the average user, it's just going to be part of tech and not that separate tool. But for some power users, there may be other applications just like there are today. So thank you so much for your question. And that, everyone, is the last one from this webinar, at least. Not the last question about AI in L&D by any means, not comprehensive as a video, but the questions that were submitted by the folks who were generous with their time and hung out with me during our Training Pros webinar. So bonus points to you. If you watched this whole thing and you hung out with me on the internet for what is almost an hour and a half at this point, kudos. Thanks so much for the time. Do you have a hobby? Kidding. I'm here too, so who's to talk? But thank you again so much for your time. I hope this conversation provided some unique perspective, maybe some added value to help you think differently about the role of AI in learning and development and how it's transforming the experience of work, and as a result, transforming the way that we support and enable that work. So as I mentioned, if you want to grab some more resources, check out recommended education programs, upcoming events, this video, past presentations, subject matter experts, anything I find new coming up, including my AI at Work magazine with the latest articles about how AI is impacting the workplace. Check out the website, learngeek.co/AI. And let's connect. Let's continue the conversation. If you have a question that I did not address because you were not at the webinar, because you have very important things to do, let's connect on LinkedIn. You can find me linkedin.com/in/JD Dillon. Happy to connect, answer any questions about how AI is impacting the work that you do every day. But otherwise, thank you again so much for your time today, for being part of the very important and very timely conversation around the impact of AI in the workplace. Until next time, thank you for everything that you do, and be well. Bye now. Have a great day.